vote, I'd like to talk a little bit about the line item budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Buck?
Are you guys ready for that part?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it may be helpful as you think about budgets. You know, Steve's talking about certified budget. There's also within that budget a line item budget. And the line item budget is really the conversation about that we've been having for several months at this table and honestly out with staff in many venues. And so I would start with this, and it's a lot of what Steve talked about. That authority position that we're in, that little bitty bar, so the amount of authority that we have per student is really a big deal. And so one of the expectations that you've had of the superintendent and been clear around this is you need to be presented with a balanced budget, and that's really at the line item level. So we've been making some assumptions. We still have a few assumptions left in this budget, but we do know state supplemental aid, and we do know enrollment. And because we know that, we believe at the line item level, excuse me, we're going to need to make about $2.3 million in reductions. So as you think about $2.3 million in reductions, like all of you, that has been weighing heavy on each of us as we think about what that means within our district. So it may be helpful for people to understand kind of the line of thinking that goes into if you're going to make $2.3 million in reductions, sort of how do you think about that? And so one of the things we think about is are there funding streams? Because you've heard this conversation many times. There's buckets of money in schools. The fund that we're really trying to protect is the general fund, and that's the authority and cash conversation. And one of the things we want to look into is, are there other funding sources that we can use to additionally support our classrooms and kids that we can go back and capture authority around? And there's really two pretty good examples of that. One is special education, and one is English language learning, or ELL. And so one of the things that we're going to look into as we're talking about unpacking what $2.3 million in reductions actually means is digging back into both our special education and our ELL and taking a look at, are there opportunities there to create additional supports legally? That's clearly an important part of it. To our classrooms that doesn't put additional stress on the general fund budget. So that's one of the things that we'll take a look at, and we've been sort of digging into that conversation. And actually, I think we could point to some examples where we've already taken some action in early. Sheila, help me out here. The early,
In the early learning, early
yeah,
childhood programs.
thank you. Yeah, so we've had some additional staff there and trying to reconfigure that to the benefit of our kids. So in addition to that, so that's one of the things we think about. Another thing we think about is we're working to keep class sizes where they are. It'd be nice if they got even smaller, but we're trying to keep these decisions to the extent we can away from classrooms. Now, the reality part of that piece of the conversation is about 83% of our general fund budget is staff costs and costs associated with staff. So when you think about a number like $2.3 million in reduction, and you want to keep that away from classrooms, that's important, but also realistically, I mean, when 83% of your budget is people are going to be a part of the mix of these conversations. So I would say the next thing we think about is we work to try to avoid the elimination of programs, and I think Cedar Rapids over the years has worked hard to avoid the elimination of programs. One of the things that's important to keep in mind here is, while we're talking about a couple $1 million in reduction here, this is actually millions 19 and 20 approximately of reductions over the last 6 or so years. So this isn't like the first $2 million on $200 million. We're into the 19th and 20th million, which is a very different part of the conversation to enter. The other thing we think about is, how do we keep people employed to the fullest extent possible to keep them employed? So we're going to see reductions, and I'll give an example here of reductions in teaching staff. And even in reducing teaching staff through attrition, retirement, those kind of things, are we still able to the best extent we can, keep people employed in the system? So I'll give an example. So there's really this idea of, can we access other funding streams to additionally support our schools? A recognition that reductions are going to happen. And then there is also recognition that there's additions in cost beyond the $2.3 million. And so let me give you a couple reduction examples. One reduction example is we are moving our high schools next year to a single schedule. And that single schedule is going to have every teacher teaching a full-time teacher teaching 6 periods out of 7. And so what we've done in that model is, caught in a cold here, and it's not been, it's still on me. So essentially what we've done there is we've added additional teaching time expectations to our high school teachers, and in so doing, capture back time and then gone and said, now you need to reduce FTE through that gain. So the quick math would be this. If you have 60 teachers or so at the high school, and this isn't exactly right, but just for the sake of this, if you have about 60 teachers at the high school that this could impact, they each teach an additional section. Now all of a sudden you have 60 additional sections of time. If you divided that by 6 periods, that's a teacher's time, you end up with 10 additional FTE or full-time teacher equivalent without adding a single staff member. And so what we've done then is gone to the high school teachers and said, we're going to have that happen, and then we're going to reduce FTE. So what's a little bit strange, and respectfully to our teachers, because this is asking them to do more. So absolutely want to acknowledge that, though. It may actually reduce class sizes in some cases and expand course offerings at the same time we're going to reduce FTE. So that's an example at the high school level. So we'll have at least 4 FTE, and I think that's what we're planning for at each of our high schools reduced as part of, so there's a reduction example. Another reduction example is, so there's certified, that'd be a certified example with teachers. There'll be likely impacting classified staff, so that's paraeducators, secretaries, custodians. That's probably not quite all fleshed out yet. And then are there other areas where a reduction can occur? So this would be an example. We're going to transfer a cost from general fund to SAVE. So all of the non-instructional software in the district, there's recurring costs for that. So it's time clock, it's, oh gosh, I started a list, I should have looked. Time clock, our accounting software, our HR software. So there's all examples of software that we use with annual fees associated with it that's non-instructional software. It's appropriate to take non-instructional software cost out of SAVE, so the SAVE fund, and we've been paying for that out of the general fund. So there's an example where we're going to do a reduction. We're going to work on that $2.3 million that keeps it away from classrooms and transfers the cost to a different fund. Examples of additions to the fund. So we have alternative kindergarten program, and it's been a half-day program, and I would say regarded as successful and attractive thing for Cedar Rapids schools. The doggone Iowa Department of Education has decided that, I don't know who the director was when this was decided. Gosh. Anyway, kids in kindergarten should be held to all of the expectations of the Iowa Core. That's essentially what was decided. And it makes good sense.
With naps.
With naps, yeah. Okay. And I'm going to say, and it was a really good decision. Yeah. And so if you think about the alternative kindergarten program, it was a half-day program, and so this idea that you could take alternative kindergarten, deliver on the promise of all of the expectations of kindergarten in a half-day, that's just not possible, right? It's not even practical. And we don't do that for sort of the regular kindergarten. So we believe this important is valuable enough to the kids and to Cedar Rapids schools. We had 3 teachers doing that, but they taught 6 sections because they did a half day in the morning and a half day in the afternoon. So we believe in that programming such that we're going to add 3 more teachers. So we'll have still 6 sections of that, but instead of that being delivered by 3 teachers, that's delivered by 6 teachers. So it's not the case singularly that it's just a $2.3 million reduction. That's actually a cost onto the 2.3 to drive that number to closer to 2.5, or don't get hung up on the math, but I mean, it's that kind of an example. So another example, and this was actually in the Education Committee in the legislature today, another example is it looks like Smarter Balanced is going to become the assessment for the state. And that's a good thing. I absolutely believe Smarter Balanced is the right assessment for Iowa. It's just that it will cost us approximately $265,000 to have our kids take it next year. And right now it looks like there will be no additional funding stream for that. So when you're thinking about this $2.3 million number, it's not just reductions, but it's important priority decisions that are additions that then have to be accounted for in a total and overall reduction. So I just think not all that's been fleshed out yet, and it's still dynamic. We still have people retiring. We still have people leaving positions that potentially creates attrition and potentially creates these other savings. So just thought it would be important for those with us, but also knowing that there's lots of people in the community that watch this, just to give a sense for kind of the thinking that we're using to arrive at the decisions that will be ultimately made around these reductions. So.